I'd had a bit of COVID over the last, but I've had COVID on and off, and it seems to be lingering a bit. The other COVID seemed really hard, but they didn't linger as long as these weaker strains. Weaker strains, for me anyway, just seem to keep coming back, unless it's other strains starting, I don't know. So I'm kind of working with that, and I was relating it to the cerebellum. And it is something I haven't done for a while, but I realized that the organs that were under strain, like the lungs, the heart, it was the spleen, probably a bit the liver, as I brought those in contact with the cerebellum, they were able to offload the stresses with them. And they released into the cerebellum, and as soon as that energy, as soon as the karma, whatever the stress, related back into the cerebellum started working in a new way. It changes dynamic, it becomes a healer, and was connecting to the higher self to give somewhere for these stresses and energies to go to. And I think with many diseases, we may feel unfortunate that we've got them. But if there isn't an anchor in us for them to connect to, it's hard for them to stay. And I think with things like COVID, or with me, Lyme disease, they also produce their own anchor. They produce a load of stress in you and then reside in that stress, and it's hard to get rid of. But always from the beginning with holographic breathing, what I've noticed is all of the areas of the body connecting to the brain, whether it's the cerebrum, the cerebellum, or the central brain complex. Something about holographic breathing is allowing it to work holographic, and these energy pathways from all of the organs and the different parts of the body connecting to the brain, and then the brain connecting that to the higher self. And I was really, it is very, very undermining with Lyme's disease, because it is a bit like your immune system can't defend you. It's like that thing that is meant to keep you alive is no longer working. And the Lyme's disease does that. It goes into different parts of the brain and manipulates your immune system so you can't defend yourself anymore. I don't think it totally disenables it, because it wants to keep you alive. You're like this poor host for this bug that keeps you barely alive so it can live. So there was that. There was having to connect the brain with all of the bits so they could release and that could connect to the higher self, to enable it to work again, or to clear the different diseases. Because Lyme disease, you've got the Lyme disease, but also it undermines your immune system. So you catch every flu, every cold, every bug, and you can't get rid of them. I'd have chest infections for months, and then they may go into pneumonia, and then back into, it's horrible. And for me, just totally disenabling and disheartening. I'd say to God, look, if I can't barely stay alive, if I haven't actually got the strength to be the healer, or be a healer, or do these things, I can't really see any point in me being here. So it's very demoralizing. But somehow actually one person, I had very benevolent acupuncturist. When I had the Lyme's disease, then I lost all of my money and my home, and I also lived on a wide beam barge. I lost all of that and ended up homeless. I just lived in a van where I still am. Many years later, I've become used to it and quite enjoy it now. And he treated me free. And I said, I've got to leave now because I've got no money, everything's gone, I can't afford any. And he said, no, you just keep coming. And he'd say things like, money is not really, he had plenty of money really, but he said it's not so important. The only thing you leave this planet with is what you've built up spiritually. And I was talking to him about, you know, I was saying, I think about topping myself. I think about killing myself because what is the point? I don't have a life. I'm just permanently ill. And he said a very interesting thing. He said, you have to put a value on life, whatever it is, however bad it is. You have to put a value on that. And that really changed something for me. It's like, no matter how bad it is, life itself is still a value. But anyway, we went on a bit of a sidetrack there, but making these connections from the brain to the body, it wasn't just that the illness, or it was like, as those connections broke down, the brain was confused and the immune system was confused because it couldn't understand what the illness was because the energetic connections and the nerve connections had been broken down. So the information, the correct information from the body wasn't getting to the brain. And it was like I wanted to inform my immune system what was wrong with me so that it could fix it. But in clearing these channels so that my brain understood what was happening, I realized that the receptors and the channels and the nerves, it wasn't just that they had become affected by Lyme disease, which was breaking down the communication, but what was housed in the nervous system and definitely through the spine, I just feel it going now, talking about it, was the bardo and our past karma for lifetimes. That karma is sitting in the connections between the organs and the brain, and between the brain and the higher self. So as we start opening up those connections, it's not just that we're clearing a disease or allowing our immune system or our brain to understand a disease. We're clearing our karma of this lifetime, and we're clearing our karma from many lifetimes, or all lifetimes. As soon as you move into the Kundalini and cleansing through the spine and cleansing through the brain, that energy, it's not like one working with one individual lifetime. It's like en masse. There's no time lineage there. It's en masse. It's the whole karma of all of that, and that is being cleansed through. And it's no longer, even though they probably are your past lives, it's not so personal. This lifetime feels personal. Previous lifetimes you can't really remember, don't feel so personal, and you can just let it go. You can let it unfold as sensations or a movie or just when the energies start traveling through the mind and it just starts turning, you are no longer identified with that karma. So that is kind of what we're working with. Now, with this particular webinar, we could probably easily do, I don't know, at least a 6-seminar series on it. Because there are lots of organs and areas of the body that you can relate to the cerebellum, and we can only work with so many. And I've chosen ones that relate to COVID because I think people have been quite undermined by COVID, and generally people seem quite tired, and it seems to be lingering COVID. There just seems to be this lingering COVID disease, and one variant, everyone gets over one variant, and then there's the next variant, and you got that. And I personally don't believe any of the way they say these diseases travel. For me, I might be wrong, but my feeling is they just go through the whole population. If you're in a country and COVID's there, within a couple of weeks, it's just spread through the whole country, whatever you do. You know, I think we breathe in, I don't know how many billion viruses a day we breathe in, but it's a lot. And it really just depends on the state of your immune system, how well you fare or not. And there is a certain level of autoimmune response, like our bodies respond in a bad way to COVID, and the body ends to one level or another. I'm not talking autoimmune like I'm going to die of MS type autoimmune. I just mean in a gentle way that you can't get over it because your body's confused and fighting itself to a lesser or greater extent. And for me, I normally feel it's sitting into the heart first, so we will work with that. It obviously affects a lot of people's lungs, so we'll also connect that up with the cerebellum. And I just thought we'll work with the face and how the face connects to the cerebellum, and then we'll start working down through the organs. And I was thinking of doing the yellow energies, which would be the stomach, the spleen, also the esophagus and tongue. And the other organs I was thinking of doing, because it seems to hit people's kidneys as well, was the kidneys, adrenals, the bladder, and the penis and vagina and urethra, which is the blue energy circuit. But before the webinar, I was talking to the energies, and they're saying, no, you've got to do the deep earth energies. So we're actually going to do a bit of liver and a bit of pancreas. So that's kind of the framework. Whether it stays in that framework, I have no idea. The neck is very important, the neck. We've worked a bit with the energies of the neck. So we've got the whole body. And one of the ways I split up the body and everything when I started with holographic reading was like hara, heart, and intellect. And that we've got our abdomen and pelvis, more the hara, this area, the lungs and heart, more the emotional and feeling. And then the brain, the intellect, and when all three align, there's a connection to the higher self. But also there's one of those in the head and neck. The neck is very much to do with the hara, is very much to do with the earthing in the body, it's very much to do with the legs. The face, the energies of the face have a very heart type energy, heart and lungs, it's that emotional quality. And then the energies of the cranium, or of the brain, of the cranium, that is more the intellect and higher self. Now, I'm going to show you the anatomy in a bit, but I'm going to describe it first. And it was interesting for me because I did know the anatomy, or a certain amount of it from my cranial trainings, that all of the nerves from the face, they come back and they go into the central brain complex, which is kind of the brain stem and the thalamus on top of it. So you've got nerves, you've got one nervous system, which nerves just going down the spine. This is according to me. I know they've got different names, but I've forgotten the names. So you've got one nervous system that goes down through the spine and then spreads out through the body. You've got another nervous system, which are the cranial nerves. And these come out of the central brain complex. And the majority of them, all of the nerves in the face, they come from the they don't come from the spine, or some, maybe to the tongue. There might be some in the first couple of vertebrae, but the majority of them go into the central brain complex. And then also the vagus nerve comes out of that central brain complex and travels down through all of it, connects to the throat, the heart, the lungs, the tongue, then all of the organs in the abdomen, down all of the organs in the pelvis, and it connects to the organ body. And for me, these cranial nerves, I think they've got the wrong name, because calling them cranial nerves gives them a quality of the mind or the intellect in a way. For me, should be called facial nerves, because they have a more female heart orientated energy. The energies traveling through the spine for me have a bit more of a male direct type kundalini rising up the body to the brain. The organs release through the vagus nerve. This has a more female kundalini for me. It relates to the face, and it relates to the central brain complex, and it relates to the cerebellum. I think one of the reasons people phase in and out of sleep and think they're still awake, even though they've fallen asleep or half kind of going in and out of a dream state consciousness, is that the breathing is automatically working through the face. The whole face is starting to breathe in a way that it wasn't doing before. Structurally, in holographic breathing, the face, the cranium, the neck all start breathing in a way they weren't before. And you've got all of these facial nerves and the vagus nerve. They're involved physically and energetically in that breathing. And they're all feeding back into the central brain complex, which is the center of everything. Those from the central brain complex, they come out through the midbrain and they feed into the cerebrum. From the pons area, they go back and feed into the cerebellum. And all of those together come down either through the vagus nerve or the spine and feed the whole body. So that central area connects through the nervous system to everything. And the breathing of the face, the nerves are all feeding directly back into that. And they're all connecting around the pons and the cerebellum. And again, there's another naming problem here, because if you look at the anatomy of it, you've got the pons called one thing, you've got the cerebellum called another thing, but the cerebellum is two organs or a pair of organs at the lower back of the brain. It comes forwards and it wraps around this central brain complex, and the area where it's wrapping around is called the pons. But it's actually, you could easily call it the front part of the cerebellum. And for me, the cerebellum is a bit like the lungs, the pons is a bit like the heart, and they're intimately connected. It is basically nerve fibers. There's no difference in the anatomy. They're nerve fibers. You've got the cerebrum on top. It's all coming together in two channels, and they arrive into the central brain complex just below the thalamus. I've forgotten what I was talking about. Then you've got the cerebrum coming around through the pons, which is the front part of the cerebrum, and also feeding in to this central brain complex. So you've got like a tree here, and they come together through this channel that goes straight down. And then you've got this, it goes out like a tree, it spreads out like leaves or cauliflower in different areas, comes around, and then that connects into the central brain complex, the spine and the facial nerves. They are all basically nerve fibers. There's no difference in the anatomy of them. They're neurons, to the main part, neurons with the axon, which is traveling along, taking the charge, myelinating glial cells around them, and astrocyte cells holding it all together, and different things holding it all together, and then microglial cells swimming through it, which are the immune system. There's not much else other than that. So they're made of the same stuff, and somehow they think. And somehow they connect to God, and somehow our body is connected it. And really, I don't think science knows that much about what is going on there, because you're talking about spirituality really, and the meaning of life when you're talking about the brain or anywhere in the body. So energetically, for me, the face relates, or the energy points that I've shown in the face, they more relate to the cerebellum. So we're going to work with the face to connect to the central brain complex and the cerebellum, and then we're going to use that. That will light up the cerebellum. That will give people access to the cerebellum. And what I was saying with holographic breathing, whether you're doing it in an advanced way like these webinars, or whether you've just learnt it from someone or one of my free webinars or video or something, I think people are continually changing their state of consciousness, because it's continually accessing to this central part of you. The thalamus at the top of the central brain complex is where people say our seat of consciousness is. And apparently it's this area is where the spirit leaves the body when we transition to another life. It comes out through this central brain complex and the thalamus. So just the actual physical movement, the actual nerves, they all feed into this central place. And I think the reason people, getting back to my original point that we left about 15 minutes ago, the reason people fall asleep is that the cerebellum is to do with the dream state. And so people pass, I don't know that people are passing, well maybe they're passing in and out of consciousness, but they're going into a shamanistic dream state. And that can be deeply healing. So that is what we're working with. Now, a lot of this is also going to interface with the cerebrum, because obviously you've got in this around the pons, it's all coming together, all of the nerve pathways from the whole top of the brain, all of the nerve pathways from the cerebellum, they're all coming together in the pons and behind the pons, and all connecting and then becoming this central channel. So from the cerebellum, it won't just feed into that central panel and just come down. goes into it and it goes up and down. So, but generally I find working with this area, it will connect me to the cerebellum, but we will also probably connect up a bit into the cerebrum. Let me show you some pictures. Oh, okay, look, there's one. So, central brain complex from the front, this is the thalamus at the top, the two lobes of, now I painted these, I can't say they're dimensionally correct, but they look pretty. And then you've got the fourth ventricle in the middle, this is a ventricle, and these are ventricles, all with cranial fluid. But you've got this central column here, you've got the cerebellum feeding into the pons, into this whole heart central area. And then you've got the two lobes of the cerebrum here, and their channels come in just below the thalamus there. It's called the midbrain. All their nerve pathways come in there. All these nerve pathways, and they all meet in the pons area. And that connects, this is like Grand Central Station or something, that connects to these areas and the whole rest of the body. And all of the nerves from the face and the act is all feeding directly into there, that central area. So you can see, you know, as a little budgerigar there, the pons looks a bit like the heart and chest area. The cerebellum is like a pair of wings maybe, I'm not sure. But these two, this here is an extension of that. All the nerve pathways are coming forwards into this area, and that's all joining and meshing together in a central channel. You've got the thalamus here, and all of the nerves of the cerebrum, they all come down just below the thalamus and join in here. So it's all happening here. It's all connecting. Everything connects in that central area. And the face, with holographic breathing, with this moving breath and these energies, all of the nerves from the face, from here, the face is here, they're all coming out. Some of them a bit lower down here, but they're all connecting into that central place. See if there's any others. I think that's, well, there's a nice one. I haven't got one of the vagus nerve, but there we have it with the spinal cord and dural tube and cranial fluid. And there we have it. This is front on and that's side on, so you can see it coming down the spine. This looks like, you know, the kind of ornate walking sticks, like a shaman would have his staff. These look like one of those staffs which would have the ornate magical tops on them. So our central nervous system is a bit like that. I'll show a few more, they're nice. No, I don't know actually. Just that one, there's the cerebellum at the back here, and there's the spinal cord with all of the nerves coming out. But this is the cerebellum here. All right, let's look at it in a bit more detail, kind of medical type view of it.